Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking all things hurricane, right? If you're still considering moving to the Tampa Bay area, you really need to be prepared. You need to understand from a Floridian what it's actually like to be in two back-to-back hurricanes, because you can't listen to the media, you can't listen to the weather people outside of our area. You need to listen to us locals and we will keep you safe and sound. I also have some really great tips, some tips you may never have heard about or didn't even think about. And so I want to give you as much information as possible and prepare you. I hope you'll stay tuned to the end because I'm going to share those tips with you. And so let's get after it. So growing up here in Florida, the west coast of Florida in particular, you know, hurricanes, you just get used to them. They were never really that big, honestly, but they've gotten increasingly larger and more impactful as the decades have gone along, as we've all seen. And so what is it really like to go through two back-to-back hurricanes? So I just kind of wanted to pop on here and give you my take and talk to you a little bit about my friends and my clients and what they've suffered through. I'm hoping this video will educate you so that when you do decide to relocate to Tampa, that you will be properly equipped to handle our crazy weather. You know, 6 months out of the year, actually more like 8 months out of the year, we don't have a problem, but you have to be prepared for the certain months that we do have some issues, right? So let's start with the positive side. So the positive side is people are always going to want to live in Florida. Most people that I'm still talking to, the hurricanes have not deterred them. So if you're one of those people, stay tuned, okay? Stay tuned to the end for my tips. But there's many reasons. Our wonderful weather when it's not hurricane season, our beaches, our lively outdoor living, and you know, all of the outdoor activities that you get to do, and wonderful restaurants and people and diversity. You know, we're really becoming this wonderful melting pot, and so people are still coming here, right? There's not many places left that you can get a property by the beach. You know, yes, maybe it's $1 million, but in other areas of the country, you have to pay multi-million dollars. So there's still options if you're somebody who really loves the sunshine and the beaches and that sort of thing. So here's some basic information that you need to know. Let's talk about categories because it's very important, right? I equate it to when I lived in Los Angeles and I lived through the Northridge earthquake. And that was, they called it a magnitude 6. I'm gonna be honest, we felt like it was closer to a 7. And I had only been there for 5 days, so that was sort of an adjustment. But, you know, you don't get any warning with earthquakes. You get warning with hurricanes. You usually get sometimes up to 2 weeks, a good week. We just had a potential hurricane developing near Honduras. It was Hurricane Sarah, and we were watching it, right? And it was starting to increase and increase and increase. And it got to the point where it was almost about 90% sure it was gonna come our way. And then, you know, things change and it went to Honduras, and because it hit land, it dissipated. So we're just gonna get wind and rain now. We're not gonna really probably have any significant weather at all. So things can change on a dime is what I'm trying to say. The best thing to do though is to get educated on the reality of hurricanes here, not listening to the media and other news outlets that aren't here locally. We're gonna tell you where it's at. So let me go back for a second. Let's talk about hurricane season. So hurricane season can be anywhere from June to the end of November, fingers crossed. When I'm shooting this video, we're mid-November, so we're hoping we're, you know, in the clear for the rest of the year. And usually the storms start to occur when our water starts to get cooler, and that's usually around August and October. And by the way, it's November and I'm still getting bitten by bugs, just so everybody knows. It's not cool enough yet to kill them off. We, you know, again, hope that'll happen. So historically speaking, Tampa hasn't had a direct hit of a hurricane since 1921. It's pretty good odds. Just because we didn't have a direct hit doesn't mean obviously we weren't impacted. I'm sure you all saw on the news how we were impacted, but I want to break it down a little bit more for you. But first, let's talk about a little bit of the folklore around the Tocobago Indians and those Indian burial mounds. There's a few left, I believe, in Safety Harbor. There might be some left over in the Pinellas County area near the water, of course. And it has been told that the Indian chiefs would bury their loved ones near the water, and they would do a prayer. And the intent was to protect the land and to protect their ancestor and keep them in a safe spot, you know, for, you know, however long they the chiefs would do a blessing over the mounds to protect the land that supported the burial of their ancestor, as well as protecting their ancestor in the afterlife. And so there has been a lot of, old wives' tales kind of going around. We're like, well, we've got the Indian mounds protecting us, Believe what you want. I tend to think that that's pretty cool, especially because of Milton was supposed to come to Tampa, and at the last minute, it went south. I'd like to say thank you to all the Tocobago Indians that preyed on our land. Let's hope it sticks. So like I said, we were talking about categories, right? Category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the ones that you need to be concerned about are 3, 4, and 5. If 5 happens, you need to get out of the state. That you need to go to New York, okay? Go somewhere. Because as we saw, obviously with Helene, it went to North Carolina, and Helene did a lot of damage in North Carolina, very devastating up there, and they weren't prepared for it either. So a lot of times too, you need to be aware of the category because it's gonna correlate with your flood zone and your evacuation zone. So for me, I'm in a hot flood zone, right? I live on a canal, it feeds out to Tampa Bay, and I'm in the red, as they consider it. And because of that, they always ask me to evacuate. I've only evacuated once, Milton. Well, Helene was a category 4, but as you recall, probably, it went up to what we call the Big Bend area near Tallahassee. But we had all the sustained winds and the rain. Mainly, it was the storm surge that caused so much problem here, right? And it totally wiped out so many houses in the Pinellas County area that were along the water there. I had friends of mine that live a little bit more inland that you wouldn't think would have had any issue with flooding, and they flooded. Like 5 feet flooded in their house from storm surges inland. So there's no rhyme or reason, and you can't predict with these storms. You just have to be prepared, right? So with Milton, when Milton came around, I'll tell you personally, my mother lives alone. She's 80, she's very capable, but she has some handicaps. And I live in a condo, and I wasn't quite sure if the storm surge was gonna happen again, and this time we weren't gonna get lucky, right? I did experience some storm surge, but my condo is up high enough that it didn't affect me. By the way, I'm blessed. I did not have any storm problems. I had a little bit of flooding in my front door. I had prepared for that, didn't do any damage. Knock on the wood that I'm standing near. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Tocobago Indians. But my mother lives in the bottom floor in East Lake Woodlands, and I was concerned that if any flooding happened, I couldn't get to her, right? Because even if we don't flood in our individual houses, how am I gonna get to her? So I made the executive decision pretty quickly when I started to track the storm. And this is something that one of the tips I'm gonna talk to you about. I made a reservation, one of the last reservations in Orlando, and people are like, why are you going to Orlando? I do have a reason for that. Traditionally, once the hurricanes hit land, they dissipate. So we could handle a tropical storm, or we could handle a Cat 2. But I wasn't gonna be sitting in my condo and have her sit in her condo with a Cat 4 that could potentially become a Cat 5. So it was kind of scary. So we got out of Dodge. And like I said, I'll tell my evacuation story here in a second, but I wanted to talk to you about Milton and the effects of Milton on people inland. So no, we did not have the storm surge that we had with Helene, but a lot of because we had got so much rain and we had not recovered from the first hurricane from Helene, that a lot of my friends that live in Carrollwood, and Carrollwood is dead center of town, it's inland. They lived closer to Lake Magdalene that has a lot of these lakes and ponds and a lot of runoffs. And she has one in the back of her house. She has a fence, but my girlfriend got flooded. Now it was a couple of inches, but a couple of inches can still do some damage. I think it was under 6 inches, but she's gonna have to get all new floors, all new cabinets. Right now she doesn't have a kitchen. We're almost at Thanksgiving. She can't do anything in her house, and they have to wait. They have to wait for their insurance check, right? Luckily she had flood insurance. Technically, she didn't need it. With her loan, she lived inland, but because she's smart and she knew about that pond behind her house, she was like, that thing might not keep us safe. So her whole street, by the way, in her neighborhood was covered in water. It looked like a lake. She was joking, saying she had waterfront property now. Her son was in his kayak checking on neighbors. It can happen anywhere, you guys. Just because you don't live in a flood zone doesn't mean you can't potentially have some flooding. Keep that in mind. I do want to share with you guys kind of a sad story. One of my favorite, I mean, all my clients are my favorites, but this was a client of mine in Dunedin. I had sold his girlfriend her house in Dunedin, and then they bought a bigger house over on the water side, on the canal side in Dunedin. And I think we closed April, May, and I got a very disturbing text from him days after Helene, and with pictures of the house completely burning down. I was very devastated for them. I never thought I would know somebody whose house burnt down due to a hurricane. And what we've come to find out is, again, with these EV charging stations in the garage, as well as golf carts with those, I think they have lithium batteries. As soon as salt water hits them, they spark, and obviously they can cause a fire. In his case, it sparked as soon as the electricity came back on. He didn't put the breaker off. Unfortunately, it sparked and the house was gone before he could even, he was at his in-laws' house. He drove over and it was gone. So things like that do happen. Everybody has been affected. Our town is still affected. Our beaches are still recovering. There's debris everywhere. There's dust in the air. They still are trying to clear out neighborhoods, stacks of drywall and cabinetry you see on everybody's, as you're driving down neighborhoods now. And they've been coming with trucks, and they've got these dumping stations. And we're still trying to, get back to some sort of normalcy. And I've even noticed there's some houses on the market that, still have storm damage. So people are pulling the plaster, just so you know, people are pulling the plaster off the walls, the floors up. They're trying to dry things out. But a lot of people aren't going to get significant enough money to do the repairs themselves, so they have to sell. That's the sad side of it all. But I want you to be ultra prepared. So how do we do that? How do we prepare for a hurricane? This is the thing that I suggest. Number one, you need to download, it sounds very basic, but you need to download our local weather app. Now, I love Dennis Phillips, so I have AccuView Weather on my phone, and so you get alerts, you get updates, and it's very quick. So you will also get alerts from the area. I don't know who's sending it to me. I'm sure it's the county, and it'll say, hey, your evacuation zone, you need to evacuate right now. And so trust me, you'll get alert after alert after alert. Thank God, technology, you're not gonna miss something. Let's just put it that way. And again, because you wanna keep track of these storms that are, either in the Atlantic or the Gulf, and you wanna be able to track them. Again, you're gonna have probably about 7 days to prepare. Check your flood zone. Like I mentioned, I'm in a hot zone. You wanna make sure you check your flood zone, and you wanna make sure you know your evacuation areas, and if you need to evacuate, just so you know, if you choose not to evacuate, you're on your own. The medical people will not, the EMTs, all the fire people, they are not going to come rescue you. That's why they want you to evacuate. And if you don't want to go to a shelter, which I completely understand that, if you have the means, you need to do what my mom and I did, and we booked a hotel for several days, and we hunkered down and waited it out. So what I ended up doing, luckily that I secured us a hotel in Orlando, is we got out of town. It was supposed to hit, I believe, on a Thursday. We got out of town on a Tuesday. And you have to watch the traffic as well, because it was chaotic. A lot of people head 75 north to go to Atlanta, or some parts of Georgia, or the north part of Florida, and it is bumper to bumper traffic. So that's why I decided to go Orlando. I was like, let's go over here. And they opened up the shoulder, and not a lot of people like to drive on the shoulder. I have a little car. My mom and I both have kind of slender cars. So we rode the shoulder, and we got to Orlando in an hour and a half. So there was some traffic, but we missed it all. We got to our hotel, it was dog friendly, and we went and grabbed as much food as we could to sustain us for a couple of days until things started to close, because Orlando was gonna get some effects as well, and charged everything up. So that's next. You wanna stock up on supplies if you're evacuating or you're staying. So let's talk about what that looks like. I tell everybody to do your hurricane preparedness kit like over the holidays. Like, do it when you've got a week off from work or whatever. A lot of people grab those trash cans that you can buy at Home Depot that are deep, and of course they're waterproof, and you start to stack things in it. You wanna have your bottled water, you wanna have enough water that if you need to flush toilets, brush your teeth, and I've got a tip for that in a minute, so stay tuned. got some water tips for you. You wanna make sure you've got your medications, get some cash, fill all the gas tanks, right? You wanna make sure if you've got a generator, is there what you need to power the generator. I think most generators run on gas. Or you do have battery powered generator. I don't know. I don't know anything about generators. Do your research, but get all of that organized. I started to get all of my flashlights together. I got all of my charging packs, those little charging banks. I gathered them up. I started charging them immediately. Pet medication, pet food, stock up on all of that. Now here's the problem. This is why I tell people to prepare ahead of time, is because people start to hoard. I went to the grocery store and couldn't find a case of water to save my life. People, why are you taking all of the water for everybody else? It makes no sense to me. Take a case, go home. Next day, come back, get another case. They should limit it, but it's like the toilet paper pandemic issue. It makes me crazy. Oh, store all of your documents. So birth certificates, passports, any important documents, anything that you don't, any memorabilia, anything that you don't want to get damaged. You need to seal that up, put it in some sort of Tupperware or those plastic bins, store it high. So I went into my garage, because my garage is on the lower level in my house. You know, I'm in a townhouse type of condo. And so I put everything up on my shelves in the Tupperware, which I'm glad I did, because the floor of my garage got a little damp. It didn't have a ton of problems, but it did get damp. And you don't want documents to get damp, then they get ruined. So figure out for yourself like where all this needs to be, but high and dry is always the way, right? And also, as you're preparing the house, you really want to make sure that if you're on a lower level home, take everything out of any cabinet that's on the lower level and take it up, right? So you want to take everything up, even in the closets. If there's furniture, anything like that, you want to take it up. Do you need sandbags? Are you going to be boarding up windows? Do you have hurricane fabrics? Do you have hurricane shutters? There's this new thing, I'm not affiliated. I'm curious if it works. I think it could save a lot of people. It's called Damn Easy Flood Barrier System. And it looks like this kind of accordion door, but it's made out of PVC, I think. And it basically looks like one of those doggy door things, but it's solid, and you kind of crank it and it just creates a barrier. Looks like it works. I think that's going to be the latest technology coming around versus sandbags, because sandbags aren't 100%. A lot of people, what they do is they put a tarp down and then they'll nail it as high as they can and then put sandbags down. That's another way to protect things. But you want to invest in storm shutters or storm fabrics that can go on the exterior of your windows if that's the issue. If you've got storm windows or weather impact windows, you should be fine. I still have my original windows and they were fine. So I got lucky. Oh, and if you are going to board up your windows or get sandbags, prepare ahead of time, because again, there's lines for hours and days to get these supplies, and all of those supplies run out very, very fast. My mom and I was like, maybe I should board up my window because of where it faced with the wind and the rain, and I ended up only being able to tarp it. It still worked, the tarp ended up flying away, but I had something, right? Very important. If we know that there's a hurricane coming and you've got a couple of days, maybe even a week, call your homeowner's insurance. Call them. Ask them what your coverage covers. Do you have flood insurance? Call them. Call everyone. Find out what happens if something goes wrong in this house. Am I fully covered? Do I need to add some more coverage? Just because you're not in a typical flood zone doesn't mean your house won't flood. You live in Florida. You could flood. So I would check your property insurance company, call them, call the people that hold your flood, and just make sure you understand what's covered. Don't go into a hurricane blind, okay? This is super important, guys. You need to take pictures beforehand. Take pictures of your floors, doors, sliders, roof. If you can, you guys gotta get really used to, my northern people, you're probably used to it with the snow, but you gotta get used to getting on your roof. You gotta get on your roof. Take some big shots of your roof to make sure that you can see if shingles are gone. You can tell the insurance company, hey, I lost like a dozen shingles, or there's a hole, that sort of thing. Take pictures beforehand, take pictures after if you have damage. And do me a favor, if you decide to get a generator, really learn how to use it before the hurricane arrives. A lot of people have really done damage, not only to themselves, but to their houses, not operating a generator properly. You always have to bring it outside, it cannot sit inside your garage. And if you are evacuating, let's talk about this. When you're evacuating, what I took with me, because I knew I wasn't probably gonna get water damage. If anything, I was gonna get wind and rain if a window broke. I took my passport, I took personal items. I made sure I had enough dog food for a week. I made sure that I had enough water in my car for a week, because you just don't know. I took water, I took food, obviously I took a week's worth of clothing. We had cash, because you have to remember, a lot of people did not have power or internet for over a week. So you've got to be able to function afterwards, right? You have to plan ahead. Talk to your family about what the things that are important to you, and make sure that those things are in one solid area so that when you need to leave, you can grab it and go. Get yourself some gloves, just keep them handy, because trust me, when you're dealing with water and debris and trees down, you don't want to get scraped or cut, or worse, something like punctured. So just take care of yourself, okay? Be prepared, think ahead. Plan your route early. If you're even contemplating leaving, you should make a hotel reservation. Most of them will let you cancel within a certain amount of time. I would go ahead and book it, because a lot of people, when I checked into the hotel with my mom and our 2 dogs, were standing in a line out the door praying that they had rooms, okay? So you want to be prepared for that. So get a plan. If you and your family need to sit down, so are we going to stay if it's X, Y, and Z? Are we going to leave if it's X, Y, and Z? If so, what's our plan? And then you just know, I'm just going to do it, okay? We joke a lot around here because we have hurricanes, and they're just kind of little mamby-pamby hurricanes. They don't do any much damage. Sometimes a tropical storm can do more damage than a hurricane. So the reality is, we do sit around and drink and play on our phones and wait it out. There's a lot of waiting. So we joke about having hurricane parties, right? But for the most part, everybody's pretty stressed out. To sit around and wait for the big monster to come is very hard on the nervous system. My dog in particular had a really rough time. He was out of his natural environment. He's a protector anyway. He made me survey the hotel surroundings several times a day. He had to walk the perimeter and make sure everything was okay. Just keep that in mind. Let's talk about if you decide to stay, okay? So there's a couple of things you need to know if you're gonna stay. You need to designate a room that you stay in if the hurricane does come your way, and you need to stay away from windows, glass doors, and even your front door, right? Because the wind can blow things open. Also, another tip that I didn't know is that keeping the door closed helps with the wind leaking into your house. Wind is gonna come into your house anyway, but it helps with the pressure on the roof. So just keep that in mind. I didn't know about that until this year, so that's a little tip too. But you just kind of want to make sure that everything's locked down. I have some windows and doors that don't necessarily stay as closed, because like I told you, they're kind of old. So I made sure everything was locked. Lock all the windows and the doors. I put my curtains down, I put my shades down, anything that could act like a protective layer if, let's say, a tree limb flew through the window, right? You just want to be thinking like that. Keep everything charged up until like the last moment. Even if you go to sleep and you know that the hurricane's coming in the middle of the night, because that's when they usually decide to come for some reason, keep everything charged. If the electricity goes off, at least everything will still be charged, and you have those backup battery packs as well as potentially a generator, right? They have these mini generators I might buy that you can plug in multiple items if you need to as a backup. Most big generators are going to be able to keep your refrigerator on and your AC on. And that's usually our big concern, is our food and AC. You can imagine my friends and clients that did not have AC because of the electricity was off for a week. A week in Florida without AC is hell, okay? You don't want to be one of those people. You want to be smart. You want to be prepared. If you've got any hurricane questions, post them below in my comment section. Remember, I am not an insurance agent, so I can't help you with flood insurance. I don't have that information. All I know is I tell people, get it. Get flood insurance if you can. Make sure you have really tight homeowners insurance. Just make sure you are educated and you know what you're getting yourself into. But I promised you some tips, didn't I? So I've got a couple of interesting tips that I just learned as well, which I'm gonna do next time. First off, make sure you have a fire extinguisher. Have a fire extinguisher. My poor friends, he couldn't get there in time to use his fire extinguisher. You don't want to be like that. I mentioned you want to seal up your passport, birth certificates, and any important documents like that. Seal them up in baggies, put them in something, double seal them. Do what you got to do, but seal them up and keep them on your person. People have heard about this before. We did this with earthquakes, but fill up your tubs with water. You know, especially before it comes, fill up anything you can with water. I take those big tea jugs, you know, like the Amazon tea jugs. You take those jugs and you fill them up with water. Fill up as many as you can, anything that's a container, because what you're going to want to do is some of the smaller ones you're going to want to freeze. And plastic is better than glass, as we know. You can also fill up your baggies with ice. Keep them in your freezer so that they stay ice, because here's the thing, if electricity goes off for any amount of time, you want to put those iced bags in your refrigerator, and it kind of keeps things cooler longer. I did that. That worked for me because I did lose power for a little bit. Shower early. You may not have good water to shower with for a week. So take a shower. So if the storm's coming middle of the night, before you go to bed, brush everything, clean everything, get yourself pristine, because that next couple of days is going to be kind of rough. So shower early. Again, they're going to turn the water off if they think it's contaminated, and that's what happened last time with Milton. So the water got shut off for a while too, and then they kind of open it up for a little bit, but then they tell you to boil it. So you don't necessarily want to have to use that water if you don't have to. Don't buy food that spoils. So fruits, vegetables that can sit out on a counter, nuts, dried things, granola bars, just things that in case you don't have electricity, how are you going to eat? Those are the things you're going to want to keep on hand. Now, if you have a grill, you can obviously keep items. You can make the grill like a cooktop if you want to, but just keep that in mind. And a lot of people take those camping grills, and that's their hurricane grill. So if you have one of those little camping grills, I think they're only like $50, and those little propane cans, you can also turn them into a heating element as well. Again, don't listen to me about that. You can Google it and go to YouTube for stuff like that, but I saw that as well. Keep an extra cooler empty. So you're gonna want to put a lot of things in your cooler or put ice in your coolers, but really you wanna keep a big one empty in case you're gonna have to empty out your refrigerator if the electricity goes off. So keep that in mind, keep an extra cooler around. And then I thought this was probably the most genius tip that I'd heard. Take your washing machine and fill it with water and get it level to the top. That's the water you're gonna use if you need to flush. Who would have thought it? So think about that. I would have never thought that. And last but not least, everybody, please take care of your pets. I saw too many pets being left behind. Do not leave your pet behind. If you cannot care for your pet, you need to drop it off at a shelter or call a friend. But you need to take your pets with you, people, and make sure you have all the things that they need as well. Well, guys, I think that does it when we're talking about hurricanes. I mean, I'm done talking about hurricanes, aren't you? Again, comment below if you have any cool tips that you can share with everybody. Let's make this a community effort. Let's help educate people. And until next week, everybody, I'll see you around. Bye-bye.